Welcome to the Covert Narcissism podcast. I'm your host, Renee Swanson. I am not a therapist, and you are not a victim. Welcome to the Covert Narcissism podcast. I'm your host, Renee Swanson, and I thank you for joining me today. I am setting up a little mini-series, and this mini-series is on people who have dealt with covert narcissistic parents. And so I'm really kind of excited to get this jump started today. Today I have Cara here with us, and Cara, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
So, Cara, I understand that you dealt with a covert narcissistic mother, and I cannot relate to that. Mine was specific to my marriage, but I want my audience to hear from people who lived this. So, can you just kind of get this started by giving us a little picture of what that looked like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that people who grow up with covert narcissistic parents of course, we don't know it when we're children, right? So I grew up thinking that this was a normal way of life, and that having a mom like I did was a normal thing. But it was in my teen years that I started to look back and realize, maybe I would go sleep at a friend's house and I would see how that mother interacted with her children. And that's when I started to feel like there was something different. There was something a little off. Now, looking back, I can tell you a lot of things. She owned and ran a family business, and it was my job to help her in that business. She was she wasn't good with people. She was very abrupt with people. And so I would have to come in and fix it and do the smoothing out of things and, handle the more interpersonal relationships that she just couldn't. Of course, if she was in her element, everybody loved her, right? Like if she was doing what she wanted to do, then she got along great. But when it came down to like billing and finances and being fair with other people, she would take advantage, she would manipulate, and then I would have to come in and smooth things over. So looking back, I didn't have much of a childhood because of that.
Okay. When did this start for you? At what age that you were helping in the business like that? Because that sounds like some grown-up responsibilities.
Oh, by age 12. By age 12, by 14 for sure, I was working.
Wow.
And there were always, it's such a hard thing, right? With anybody that survives narcissism, there are elements of, I'm grateful and thankful for some of the things that I got to do growing up. It gave me a mind for business. It gave me good people skills, but at the same time, there were major holes that I was missing. I didn't have a parent. I was taking care of her. And when I think about, emotions and getting affection, those were things that I didn't get, but I didn't know I was missing until later in life when I started getting into relationships, and there were major gaps in my emotional education and in the way that I needed affection. I felt like I had to make other people happy. I had to fix things for them. I had to, basically run their lives or run their businesses or help them with this. And it really set me up for a lot of codependency and people pleasing. And I got into relationships with people similar to my mother because that's what felt familiar.
Okay. And so you saw this play out in your future relationships.
Yes. That I'm just coming out of a marriage, and I chose someone who I thought was different because he was very quiet and very different from my mother. My mother would she would have the rages or the yelling or the sarcastic, remarks that would kind of cut you in between being, nice. He did not, but it the way that I set it up, I went in wanting to help him and wanting to bring him out of his shell and wanting to create this life. And I had this idea in my mind, and I basically attracted someone who wanted me to do all of that caregiving and emotional regulation and, everything for him. And so I got into what was a very neglectful marriage. And if I didn't please him, if I didn't do the things that he wanted, which, whoever knew what those were, there's not a playbook for narcissists, right? You don't know what it is that you're supposed to be giving them. But if I didn't do those things, then I wouldn't get any attention, any affection, there were no date nights. There was no deep emotional conversations. There was just nothingness. It was the silent treatment times a million.
Was that similar to what you had grown up with, regarding your mom, that you had to play that same role in her world, or you paid that kind of price?
Yes. I mean, she wanted her family to look good. So I was a straight A student. I won state cross country running in high school twice. I got scholarships to go to college. But all of these things I was doing to please her, right? And so by my 20s, I was like, what do I want for my life? And I really didn't know. And I think that sometimes continues to today. It's very hard for me to know what I'm doing for myself as opposed to what I'm doing to make somebody else happy. And so that's been the big learning curve and the turning point after my divorce. I'm thankful that now I get to learn the things that I should have probably learned when I was a teenager, who I am, what I want, where my boundaries are. I'm thankful that at least I get to learn that, even though, I'm now close to 50.
So you are going through some stages now that you would expect that you would have done in your childhood of some of the emotional development. And I hear that a lot from people who've been living, under a covert narcissistic parent, is they're learning things now that they feel like they should have learned, back in their childhood, but they weren't given that opportunity. Let me ask then, the role that your mom fulfilled for you, where you were people pleasing to her, like you were tap dancing around her. Do you feel like these future relationships you had, and I don't know how many cycles of relationships you're referring to, where you just took another person and put them into her role in your life?
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what I did. I feel like I have an identity when I am trying to be seen by another person, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. It makes a lot of sense because you weren't seen by your mom. And so you've just spent your whole life trying to be seen.
It sums it up right there. That's exactly it.
Okay. And so in working through trying to figure out what you want for your life, a lot of times the voices of our parents can stay in our head for, many years, potentially the rest of our life. Are you working on trying to distinguish between voices you're hearing in your head that are from your mom, or voices that now it's your voice that's coming through? How are you doing on that?
I love that you asked that question. I was actually thinking about something that she said earlier today. She said it back when I was in my 20s. I remember exactly where I was standing. I was working on my master's degree at university, and I remember where I was standing. I was looking out a window and I was talking on the phone with her. And I don't remember what had happened, but it was very important to me to try to repair the relationship with her. We must have had some sort of falling out. And, I since I was a fixer, I desperately wanted to become closer to her and to try to get her to understand me to understand her. And so I was talking to her on the phone and I said, would you be willing to see a therapist with me? I would really like to start to repair this relationship. And I'll never forget what she said. She said, I'm not the one who's crazy. You're crazy. I don't need to see a therapist. You need to see a therapist.
Wow. Wow.
And those words have stayed with me. If, for example, when my marriage was ending, those words would come up, maybe this is me. Maybe this is my problem. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe there is something wrong with me.
Wow.
So if there's anything that, your listeners can take away, it's that we get this, there's this almost unfillable hole that these narcissistic parents leave in us that we really do have to, we have to try to go back and fill ourselves. So for me, yes, separating those voices is huge. Going back and doing some inner child healing, like I said, this is our opportunity to go back and give ourselves what we didn't get. And I'm thankful that I get that opportunity. So now I go back and it's, I get to parent my inner child how I should have been parented.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a really big thing that I've been doing as well.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you bring that up because somebody who did not grow up under a narcissistic parent, but ended up then in a narcissistic marriage, the damage that's done by that narcissistic relationship is huge. And trying to recover from that and trying to kick the voices out of our head that we end up falling into. But we had a healthy us before that relationship. When you grow up under a narcissistic parent, you don't have a healthy version of you before that relationship. That relationship is during your time of development, and that's significant. But what I want everybody to understand is it's never too late to face that, to work on it, and to heal from the damage that was done.
I agree. And, I kind of think of it as an anchor. I never got an anchor. There's no, if I'm having a difficult time or going through a difficult process, I don't have an anchor to come back to. And so we have to create that for ourselves. We have to say, I am my own anchor. And for me, another thing that I've been doing is just being really consistent in what I do for my health, how I schedule my day, who my friends are, what I do with my other family members, just so that I know that there is an anchor there. There is some sort of safety that I can return to if something should happen.
Okay. And if you think of it this way, at the end of the day, nobody's going to show up for you and brush your teeth if you don't take care of your own teeth. The same thing is true of our emotional health. At the end of the day, no one's going to show up and take care of us. We got to show up for ourselves. And that's what I hear you saying when you say, I am my own anchor. I love that phrase because you are taking responsibility now for your own healing and your own emotional self-care.
Yeah. And, I heard a therapist, I was listening to someone on YouTube, a therapist, and he said his job as a therapist is to prepare people to take care of themselves, to teach them the tips, the techniques, the tools, so that they can then take care of themselves. And that really is it. And I will say, I think that's a big part of our wound is we don't have anybody else there. We never have. So that radical acceptance of, I never have had anyone there. Now I need to make sure that I'm doing that for me. And so I need to go gain the knowledge and the tools that I need to be that anchor for myself.
Absolutely.
But one other thing I will say that's been really important to me is, I can think about these things and I can learn and I can, start to gather all of this information. But I think it's also really important how much trauma and pain that we hold in our bodies. And so that was an interesting thing for me to learn was, we have to feel these things. And it's terrifying to sit and think, my mother didn't nurture me or was not affectionate. And then I went into a marriage where literally I didn't get my hand held. I didn't cuddle. I didn't, it would be months, if not years. And so I can go into my brain and start thinking about all the ways that I need to heal, but I need to actually go into my body and feel the complete sadness and neglect and abandonment before I can let it go. So I think that's important for people to hear as well.
I think you are absolutely right. And I love that you bring that up because it is not just a knowledge-based thing. There is, your body keeps score and the trauma gets stored inside of you. And so I thank you for bringing that up. With your mom, did the day come that you had to go no contact with her, or how did you navigate that as an adult?
Yes, there was a big incident, and that's when I decided to go no contact, and I did that for about 2 years. And then, I think with most narcissists, if you come back into their lives, it's just as if nothing happened, right? And so when I started going through my separation and my divorce, I did contact her, and she said, I don't know what happened before, but let's just forget that it happened. And she actually said that out loud.
Wow.
The moment, in that time of my life, I didn't care. I needed somebody, even if it was, you know, what I thought a mother figure should be.
Right.
It wasn't actually that from her. But I didn't care, and I just put it behind me. And so now it's more of a gray rock kind of a situation. I will see her, and my children will see her for the holidays, and we will just, be friendly, um, and then that's it. And then I don't hear from her for the rest of the year. She actually moved several years ago. She has several grandchildren here in the state that I live in, and she moved to a state where she has no family, no grandchildren, and so she doesn't. That was her choice. She doesn't see any of her grandchildren, and they're all teenagers now, or almost teenagers, and she's missed several years of their lives.
Hmm. Okay. Well, I thank you for sharing that, and I want people to know that going no contact with a parent figure, that's a tough decision to make. Like it's one thing to divorce a spouse, but when in essence you're divorcing your parent, that's a whole different level of complication and trauma to face. But I liked that you went no contact, yes, but it wasn't permanent. It didn't have to be permanent. But that 2 years, it sounds like maybe gave you some time to really start to heal from that, the damage from that relationship, and now puts you back in a position where, yes, you can have contact with her, but it's on your terms and it's kind of at arm's length, maybe would be a good way to put it.
Yeah, I like that you said that. I think having the choice and the autonomy in this has been really good for me. That I can say, yeah, okay, I want to reach out to her, but it's going to be on my terms. She was in town for the holidays, for example, and I took my children and we went to visit. And then as soon as I felt any sort of discomfort, I just said, oh, we're going to take off. Bye. Nice to see everybody. And we left. And that, for me, having that power to do that was a really big step, that I didn't feel like I needed to stay and entertain her and cater to her. Um, Practicing that was actually a really healthy step. And so I would say to people, go no contact. And then if you feel like you can do it on your terms, then do it. But as soon as you start getting any of your safety and power taken away, then stop. Then go.
And you step away. Yes. And I think that's great. And I love to hear that. And some of what that changes is now when you started to feel some of that, twing of narcissism come back, you didn't feel obligated to stay and fix it. You didn't feel obligated to continue tap dancing around her or people pleasing around her. And so that it's empowering that the sense of obligation just isn't there anymore.
Yes. And I will also say it's it builds confidence in me to be able to now recognize it. Whereas before, when I was a child, I didn't know what I was hearing. I didn't know what she was saying. I didn't realize it was manipulation. Whereas now I can sit down at Christmas dinner. I can hear her say something. I can internally make a note of it and say, check. That's exactly what she's doing there. And for me, I need that because you grow up not being able to trust anyone else, but also yourself. And so now being able to spot that in other people, now I have a little more confidence going forward that I can see when people are being toxic. Whereas
Right.
before I couldn't.
Yeah.
So
Good. I'm really glad to hear that. And it is in that parenting yourself, you've learned now to give yourself the space to trust your own gut and your own instincts.
yes, absolutely.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, Kira, thank you so much for sharing your story here today. I do want to ask, what other words of hope or encouragement would you give to someone who is maybe facing this and, not just now getting their eyes open, going, I think this is what my parent is, and this is the voices in my head now. Do you have any words of hope that you would leave with them?
Yeah, I will say, do your research, do your homework, get in therapy, get a coach, but then understand that the healing process is not a linear, straight line, easy to see the end goal process. It is very normal to take a few steps forward and start feeling really good, and then to take a few steps back. That's a normal thing. It's also normal to uncover different memories as you go. I had a friend tell me, if we were handed all the pain that we went through all at once, it might kill us. So when we're healing, you're going to get little bits of, oh, this happened. And then you work on healing that. And then, a couple months might go by and you feel great. And then all of a sudden you're back in it again. That's a very normal thing. And I want to tell people who are going through the healing process, it's not linear, and you're doing great. If it keeps popping up, you're doing great. That's what's supposed to happen.
Well, yes. And I thank you for saying that, because the more safety you start finding in yourself, the more these memories and painful experiences and traumas start to just resurface. And then there's another one, and then there's another one. But that's a really good sign that you are getting stronger.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Kira, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And everyone out there, if this story resonates with you, I strongly encourage you to find the help that you need, find the resources. They are out there. Reach out to me anytime. I do offer both individual and small group coaching sessions. You can find all of that information on covertnarcissism.com. And I wish everyone so much peace on your journey of healing. You have been listening to the Covert Narcissism Podcast. If you are struggling with covert narcissism in your life, I help people to heal from covert narcissistic abuse. If you are struggling with the isolation, the self-doubt, and the obsessive thinking, then this is the program for you. I offer both group and individual options. This is live, personalized coaching that is specific to covert narcissism. Reach out to me anytime. You can find me at my website, covertnarcissism.com. I'm not a therapist and you are not a victim. I am a coach and you are a survivor. I wish you so much peace on your journey of healing. The information provided by Renee Swanson and the Covert Narcissism Podcast is for educational purposes only and is not to be used for diagnosis purposes and not intended to be a substitute for clinical care. Please consult a healthcare provider for guidance specific to your case. This material discusses narcissism in general. It does not claim that any specific person has narcissism and should not be used to refer to any specific person as having narcissism. Permission is not granted to link to or repost this material to support an allegation or a claim that any specific person is a narcissist. That would be an unauthorized misuse of the material and information provided.